Welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Meagan, and my fabulous co-host is...
And hey, I'm Amanda.
Hello. We are your messy, imperfect homeschool mom friends, and we are so glad you're here. We'd love to talk about homeschooling and parenting, but we don't polish our message until it shines. Here we share the raw, unfiltered truth.
Now, that doesn't mean that we're negative. It's not my kids are an asshole and I can't stand homeschooling space. We do love our kids, right? Like, there's no question about that. And we love spending time with them. We love homeschooling them most days. But come on now, some days are hard. Some days are really freaking hard. And influencer accounts, they never really show that side, even though we'd be willing to bet just about anything that they also have those hard days.
100%. It would be so odd if they didn't. The other thing that you can expect here are progressive and secular views. There's no Jesus and dinosaurs walked the flat earth together here at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. Here we proudly affirm that love is love, Black Lives Matter, no human can be illegal on stolen land, and our bodies, our choice. And just so much more beyond that, right? The world is on fire, and if you can take those statements and extrapolate them, we're there with you.
Yes, right? I know. It's shocking, but we exist. We're here, and we're happy to welcome you into our space. Okay, so take a deep breath, relax. We're going to be a normal podcast, right? Like, this is going to be okay. This is going to be good. Today, we are welcoming a guest to the podcast. So this episode will originally air in April. Who knows when you're actually going to listen to it? But April is Autism Acceptance Month. And our guest, Leigha, has graciously agreed to come on for a discussion about her life, the neurodiverse movement, and so much more.
Welcome,
Hi.
Leigha. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
So I feel like there's no better way to break my ban of autism awareness participation than to sit here and talk to y'all. So
we are honored. Leigha, you listen to the podcast. I know you're an amazing member of our community. And you know that we have this trend here. We kick off our discussion with a recap of our weeks. It's one of the ways that we keep it real. We share the good, the bad, and sometimes there's some ugly mixed in. But when we have a guest, we like to challenge ourselves to do it in under 90 seconds so that we have as much time to spend with you as possible. So if all right with you, we'll each get that done, and then we will jump into our topic for the day. Sound good?
perfect.
Okay. So Amanda, how was your week?
My week is like, I feel like it's just the same thing for weeks now, right? I've been saying. And so, everything is fine. Like, things are fine except for my health. My health is still a hot mess. And yeah, so I'm struggling with that. And kind of every day by like 3:00, I'm just done. And so that's been a real challenge and a struggle. And then you've heard me, if you listen to the podcast, you've heard me say like, oh, it's going to get better. And I'm going to say it again. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not traveling anywhere in April. So hopefully I will be able to get some rest that I really need and kind of get back to my baseline before the big travels kicked off in December, only to start again. We've got a lot of stuff planned for May, June, and July. So yeah, there we go. Well, and just hanging on, hanging in there, doing our best. How about you?
I do feel like that's a slight improvement though, because a couple of weeks ago your brain wasn't good after 1:00. So
It's true.
you're making it to 3 now.
Yeah, it is. And I will say that, right, there is improvement. I would be much more concerned. I was just thinking with someone else, right? I was talking to something and I was like, I don't remember any part of that conversation. I'm really sorry. I know we had that, but I don't remember any of it. But I am doing better. Like, I'm remembering more and things. There's definitely improvement. So at least there's that. And anyone who has chronic illness, you know what that's like, right? When you have a bad flare and you're working your way out of it, like, it doesn't, most of the time, it's not just like you wake up then one day and you're like, oh, I'm totally feeling better. But like, you get there, it improves. And so we are improving, and hopefully April will give me plenty of time to fully improve.
Yeah. So good on my end. I have one thing that I will share out of my entire week because it's the highlight of my week. We've just moved and my kiddo had his intake appointment today at the neuropsych. And They totally accepted all of his diagnoses from his last doctor in the States. And any parent whose kid is on ADHD medicine in the United States, you will just like, I'm going to put this as a trigger warning because you might just despise me after this, right? But 6 months of prescription just handed to me all at once. In the US, you get 30 days at a time. There's all these check-ins and then trying to get the medication. And they let me fill all 6 months. I'm not counting my chickens before they're hatched because I'm supposed to go pick up the prescriptions tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. But they told me that they were showing available in the system because ADHD meds are impossible to find. And so for 6 months, I mean, this is a full-time job. I mean, I've talked about it on the podcast before, right? Trying to find where they're in stock. Then the doctor has to send the C2 form. Then, by the time they go to fill it, it's out of stock. So I have to start the whole process all over that you can't transfer as a controlled substance prescription from one pharmacy to another. 6 months, I don't have to do that. Like, I'm done. Like so beyond the beyond. So anyway, please don't hate me. Hopefully it works out as it's supposed to at 11 a.m. tomorrow. I will literally be posting a selfie if I get these prescriptions, like me holding them up and being like, for 6 months, I don't have to do this, right? Like, it's a huge task. So I'm pretty pumped. That was without a doubt the highlight of my week. If it all works out tomorrow, I'm just going to like collapse into a noodle state because it's going to be so amazing. So I'm pretty pumped. So anyway, Leigha's here. Hooray. So we are so thrilled to have you here. I know Leigha and her amazing girls from our co-op when we lived in North Carolina, and I'm excited for Amanda and for our listeners to get to know you today. So would you kick off by sharing a bit about yourself and first of all, why you're joining us for this particular topic? And you mentioned breaking your ban. So
Right.
fill us in. Stop.
So I tend to have a personal ban on Autism Awareness Month participation just because it is a highly overwhelming time for me and for a lot of people that I know. There's a lot of swirling information. I personally have 3 kids. We have a urgent family across the entire spectrum for the most part. And so it's tough to see misinformation. It's tough to see adults and total care individuals being omitted from the conversation almost entirely. Sometimes it kind of makes you feel that the month isn't even really for you, you know what I mean? And for your family. And I do see infighting, which makes me upset. I see a lot of times, sometimes well-meaning, but lots of people in our community going back and forth on everything from terminology to therapies and how they're helping their kids and how they're utilizing support in their communities. And so it's just a disheartening time. And I just prefer to not so much. So, but I broke that ban today, so
We feel truly honored.
well, thanks.
Yes, I mean, for sure. Thank you so much for joining us, right? And like, I'm putting yourself out there. We do really appreciate it. Meagan has shared with me that Autism Acceptance Month can be a difficult time for you. And so we definitely are grateful that you're sharing a piece of yourself with us and our listeners. We really hope, that this discussion, let me back up just a second. I think our listeners, our group, even when they don't actually know, they're far more open to learning. I know I myself have a lot of learning to do, and I'm definitely open to getting that. And so I'm excited that we're able to provide this opportunity and this platform. So thank you again for coming and
Thanks
helping
for
us.
letting me be a part of it.
Right. So as always, right, if you listen to us at all, we have way too many questions for the amount of time that we have. So we're going to jump in and we're going to edit on the fly. We'll see how this goes. So I think, Meagan, you want to go with our first one?
Yeah. So Leigha, you mentioned you have neurodivergence in your family. Would you share with us, to the point that you feel comfortable, kind of what your family makeup is and what your personal experience with autism is in your home?
Absolutely. So I've been in North Carolina about 20 years now. I had 3 little girls in 4 years, and now they're all teenagers. My oldest is on the spectrum. I guess that terminology, that high functioning label, that's where she would fall. I have my middle daughter, who I describe as profoundly autistic, and she is obviously on that other end of that spectrum. And we homeschool. We've homeschooled since my oldest is in 1st grade, and she's off to college in the fall. And so it's been a long run for us. And North Carolina's been good to us, but it's been a struggle as well. And so we are surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
fair enough.
we did 1 year of public school. My daughter was in an early intervention preschool, my middle daughter, for 1 year, while my oldest was in kindergarten. And it took us that amount of time to realize that that was not for us. We needed a different path, and we're walking up.
That's awesome. Okay, so if we're going to dive right into this whole April and what April means, especially in the United States, are there certain messages or narratives that make April particularly exhausting or frustrating for you?
Yes. So I feel like, yes, ma'am. I feel like a lot of what I see is performative. I see a lot of companies, businesses, they're throwing their hat in the ring and we're supportive, but then it just goes right back to cutting neurodivergency from the narrative altogether. We're back to inclusion efforts being eradicated. We're back to a complete lack of understanding. And so it is frustrating. That is a very frustrating part for me.
Oh, I can totally see that. And I feel like in the United States, even before the dumpster fire that is January of 2025, like even before that, there were so many things that were really, like you said, performative, right? And just this like, you have a day, you have a month, and so many of those groups that are being acknowledged or remembered or whatever it may be are really trying to push this, like, it's not just about the month. It's not just about the day. Like, we're here 365 days of the year. And so, how do we make that shift? How do we really be better allies?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that, right?
I feel like the Pride movement has done a good job because they came up with that term rainbow washing, right? Like to stop rainbow washing things in the month of June.
Yes.
Autism needs a similar catchy phrase to stop the performative actions, or to at least call it out in a really succinct way, the same way rainbow
Yeah.
washing became this term of calling people out for that same thing. So, okay, so in an ideal world, Leigha, if you could rewrite the messaging around Autism Acceptance Month, what would you want April to focus on, where you wouldn't feel like you needed to bury your head in the sand until the month has passed?
That's a great question. I think for me, there's a lot of factors involved. For one, again, the total care and autistic children turn into autistic adults. And I feel like that bridge is ignored oftentimes. I kind of feel like it's the Thanksgiving dinner table effect, where we want to talk about autism and we want to talk about support and advocacy, but then no one really wants to talk about the political, the voting, the money, where that comes from. That's the part that no one really wants to talk about, but that is the part that is so imperative. That's the part people don't really understand. And so I think that increasing conversation about what happens when our children go from cute to really needing serious supports in the real world, job placement, self-care. I mean, we are in a situation where we have so much of a need where I am, and the resources are so limited for people where I am. To explain, we're on a waiver here in North Carolina. There's 19,000 people on our wait list right now in our state for care. It's obscene. And we have a lack of staffing, shorted direct staff, respite workers, things of that, because pay is so low, understanding is so bleak. And so there needs to be more conversation so that it isn't just, here's more, help yourself, which is kind of where we are now. So that I would focus maybe more on that. Maybe I do see a lot of child-centered information, knowing the signs, spotting the signs, and, intervening. And that's great. Not cumulative. There's a lot more that I would like to see.
Can I just clarify before we jump to our next question? You've used the term total care a couple of times, Leigha. For anybody
Yes.
listening who's not familiar with that term, what does that represent in your world?
In my world, total care means just that. We need to make sure she's drinking water. We need to make sure that she's eating. We need to make sure that she's got her bed weight sensors on at night for eloping reasons. We have a total care situation. We're talking bathing, education, verbal prompting and physical prompting for very, very small things, putting your dishes in the sink, helping her to maintain conversation. We're talking complete all around care, 24/7.
And just if you're comfortable sharing, it sounds like she is possibly old enough to be looking at leaving the home, but you plan to keep her at home for right now, right?
So the waiver that we're on is a community-based program that is an option to state institutionalization. So there's a lot of testing that goes on. We were on the wait list for over 10 years for this waiver. And so once we're on the waiver, it allowed us to do things that are extremely difficult to pay for, extremely difficult I mean, we have locks on every window, alarms on every window, cameras, our entire perimeter for eloping reasons. It allows us to have an entire staff of doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, community care staff, and all of us work together day by day. It is really a day by day situation. And we appreciate this option. And it is, like I said, 24/7 in our home all the time, as long as we are able to manage it. And so this is what allows us to manage it, is these programs.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
Okay, so I feel like this is an impossible question. So do your best and don't stress
I
it.
will.
Okay. So what does meaningful allyship look like for families like yours?
That's a great question, because we're talking beyond basic kindnesses, right? We're talking involving real change here in this area. So for us, using defamatory language in our home and in front of our family is a number one, which is more of an issue than I ever thought that it would be. Close family, friends, it's a jungle out there. And that is number one for us, is that we need respect in that way. Secondly, our daughter having a behavioral care plan, that care plan is available to anyone in her life to read who would like to know more about her, spend more time with her, and know how to adequately respond to issues that may arise at that time. And so for us, one of the most meaningful allyship type of situations is when someone offers to become direct staff. And that is not something everyone can do. A lot of people are in the, well, I don't think we could handle that phase, space, and that is fair. But every once in a while, someone will dive in and will go and get trained and will learn and will take those classes and earn those certifications just because they love us and just because they understand how hard it is and that sometimes we need emergency backup. And we are very lucky to have had a handful of people in our life do that for us. And that is the number one tippy top, gets no better than that. And so that's where we are with that but in terms of even just simple kindnesses, something just as simple as when you talk to my daughter, talking without hyperbole, without metaphors and idioms and jokes and things that she truly, it takes a long time for her to process. And not that she can't understand, she can, but most people are wanting that interaction to be faster. And it puts her in a position where she feels uncomfortable responding. And so she just will not respond. And so just those simple kindnesses, often just lending an ear, to myself. I have 2 other children, who are in the trenches, right, all day. And an ear for them is really helpful as well, because when you reach out for help, sometimes it feels like complaining, feels like attention seeking. It feels like, you don't have a handle on things and people are judging you, especially in this climate. And so that is meaningful allyship to us.
I love that. And I think it's hard. We've been reading this book, Differently Wired by Deborah Reber, in our book club, and which is all about raising children with different wiring of sorts.
Yeah.
And there's this piece in there about comparing our various experiences and how everybody kind of wants to stack their cards up against one another. And so I remember having that conversation with you once ages ago, like, is it ever frustrating for you? Because I imagine there's people whose children don't require the amount of support that your kiddo does. And then they're like putting themselves in that same basket. And it's like, oh my gosh, what I wouldn't give to like take a shower without having to, arrange coverage or something like that. Right. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I can imagine that becomes really, really difficult. So, okay. So you brought up terminology a little while ago,
Yes.
and then also brought up kind of disparaging language. And we've talked before in other episodes about how the neurodivergent movement doesn't seem to have fully gotten in alignment with, like, here's terminology that we like and adopt, and here's terminology that we find disrespectful or harmful. in the same way that other movements have. And it's coming, right? Hopefully it's coming.
It's moving
Hope-
along.
It's moving, right? And it's a moving target. So you kind of have to like, what's appropriate? You know, I mean, when my kiddo was diagnosed, it was right after Asperger's had been taken out of the equation, right? So it's like, okay, all the language is moving all the time and you have to try to keep up with it. So there's kind of this ongoing debate within the community about terminology like nonverbal versus non-speaking or low functioning versus high support needs. And so I'm just kind of curious where you land on some of those things.
I'm very relaxed in this aspect. I don't know why I'm so relaxed in this aspect, but I am. I think maybe having children that fall all over the spectrum and being so heavily involved in my daughter's care at this point, I have seen these terms be used diagnostically, you know, when doctors and therapists need to get, you know, shorthand and need as much information as possible as quickly as possible. And so these have purpose in my world. These, you know, all terminology has purpose in my world. Some of it does sting, though, right? Some of it is stinging. Some of it could be much better said. And I also feel like it doesn't really, it divides us up and it doesn't really adequately describe, like if you were to say, you know, oh, high functioning, that's a term that my oldest does not love very much because she feels like, it's kind of the, well, it's, I have autism, but it's high functioning. It's not the bad one, you know, that type of thing. But it also doesn't really adequately describe her struggle because she may be high functioning, but that doesn't mean that she functions easily. And so I feel like they don't even really serve their purpose all the time. And on the other side of it, though, I feel like no matter how we decide to slice things up into levels, you know, level 1 and level 3 are different. You know, there are differences. And we're talking about sometimes more, we've talked about differences versus deficits. I've heard this conversation before. And at this level, we are talking deficits. Also, we are talking, you know, that there's a wide range here, right? So I let people use the language that they like. I tend not to correct people. I tend to let that flow and focus in our immediate family when it comes to that. So,
Well, right. And I think that's the thing that's like so important that, and we talked about it in this and in other things too, is about that, like the people who are living it day to day, they have the language that they like, that works with them. And if you want to be in allyship with them or, you know, even just in their circle, the respectful thing to do is ask them how they want to be referred to or what terms they want for themselves and try to remember, right? Like no one is saying you're always going to remember for every single person. It's, you know, but the process of asking and showing that you actually care what matters to them and then trying to remember to use it. And when you make a mistake, you don't make a big deal out of it. You just say, I'm sorry, I forgot. You preferred this and moving on, right? But just that, like that fundamental basic respect of showing that you understand people get to identify how they want to identify, right? In so many ways.
agreed. Afraid.
Can I just ask real quick? You mentioned that some terminology stings more than others. Would you give us an example of some of the ones that you're like, oof, that maybe you'd prefer people don't use around you unless it's in that clinical setting where it's kind of expediency, but in other settings, what are some of the things that you don't prefer?
So there's that term low functioning, right? We, you know, the alternative on the other side, while there is truth, right, to that term, because it exists for a reason, I don't like how limiting that term feels. And I don't like my daughter hearing that term. I just don't love it. It makes me feel icky. But I also understand that, you know, we're working on it. It's in progress. It's just, you know, it's not going anywhere, I don't think, for a while, because diagnostically it does have purpose. And so I understand, but it stings.
Mhm.
It
That makes
sucks.
sense.
I'll say it for you. You can say it stings. That's a very polite way
It
to say it. I'll say it
stings.
sucks.
It does suck. It does suck. All labels kind of suck. They all hit the mark a little, enough to hang around, but not enough to, I feel, be allowed to stick around.
Yeah. And then do you, sorry, this just kind of spinning off the previous question, but like, if somebody asks you, or if you're kind of in a position where you need to explain, maybe this doesn't happen and maybe it's nothing, but like, how do you describe like Ginny's ability to communicate? Like, how would you describe how to communicate with her and what her communication strengths are and how to lean into those for ease of communication?
Great question. It does not happen as often as you would think, because when someone sees you holding hands and verbally prompting someone who's a foot taller than you, they tend to just address me. And so Ginny often does not get addressed. And so I will have to say, you can ask, Ginny, you can ask, she may not respond, or she may take more time to respond, but she can hear you. And she does understand what you're saying. She was non-speaking until she was about 7. And so communication does not come easy to her. She works harder than anyone I know for very basic communication. And so I do often have to tell people, that again, that profoundly autistic, kind of as a way of saying, like, I'm going to guide you through this, friend. So, and that's what we do.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so we have loads more questions. We have lots more that we're going to talk about. But if you're listening to us and you are like, oh, I need better community. I need these kind of people to actually talk to connect with, that don't make me feel awful and that I feel like they're actually supporting me. Come find us. We have so many great community options. We have the podcast. Obviously, we're here. We're talking each week. We have a Facebook group. It has thousands, literally thousands of people in it. We vet them very carefully. So, definitely pay attention to your inbox. You might get a message from us saying, we've declined your request right now, but please message an admin so that we can get to know you a bit better. We make sure we are very careful and intentional with that group, but it's a huge group. You can join us there. If you want to do actual virtual talking and meeting, we have a really affordable option in Patreon. If you join us in our Patreon community for like $12 a month, you can come together 2 times a month with us live and have conversations. We do Q&A, we do social community building. And then if you're like, you know what, I really need to go all in, we also do coaching. We do one-on-one coaching with people, and there's links for that. Whatever that looks like, right? We have this huge range of community, and you can absolutely find us. Again, we're Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. Pretty much anywhere you type that in, you'll be able to find Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. If you're trying to find a specific thing and you just can't find it, you can probably find the link on our website, but you can also always message us on pretty much any social media app, and we'll be happy to get you the exact link.
Yeah, come hang out with us.
Yeah.
We're pretty fun, if I do say so myself, right?
Well, we're awesome.
So back to Autism Acceptance Month. So, Leigha, Autism Speaks, dare I say the name,
Yeah.
Autism Speaks,
Right.
one of the most well-known autism organizations, but also deeply controversial. So curious, since you've been living in this world for so long, what your thoughts are on their work, any impact that they've had, anything that's on your mind. Soapbox away. This is your go for it. Whatever, on any question.
Here we go. Okay. All right. So I have very mixed feelings on this subject. I have a lot of guilt because, what moms need more guilt, right? So mom guilt is real. So when my daughter was diagnosed, her formal medical diagnosis is classic autism. So level 3 with OCD and sensory processing disorder. And so when she was diagnosed, she was 22 months old. I was heavily pregnant with my 3rd daughter. And my daughter was really the first person, first person I had met total care autism in my life. And that's not even a lie. And when she was diagnosed, they basically, she's never going to talk, and she's never going to do this, and she's never going to do that. She's never going to live alone. And here is your folder of helpful resources. Yeah. And so Autism Speaks was all up in that folder. And at the time, I went where the help was. They were present in my community. They made me feel seen. They were, they were out doing things. They were telling me it was going to be okay when no one else was talking to me. And at the time, the VP, I don't know if I should say of what company, but a very famous donut chain out here, the VP, his family is touched as well, right? His family is touched as well. And so I hooked up with Autism Speaks. I proudly put on my pin, And we marched into the Raleigh legislature. And I remember one of my very favorite legislators at the time, his last name totally does not rhyme with her. And I remember him running into his office screaming, "These autism parents are just relentless." It was the best day of my life. Best day of my life. Because at the time, Autism Speaks was the only visible group on the ground getting their hands dirty, walking into the building and demanding that someone change. So that's where I was going to be, because I care much more about my child than I do public perception. And so going in there and doing that, we did end up getting legislation passed, because at the time there was zero autism legislation passed for insurance in our state. And so our children were not being treated with dignity. Our adults and our total care individuals were not being treated with dignity. And so, that was a huge thing for me. And in that journey, I realized that a lot of people who were associated with Autism Speaks were just like me, and they were raising total care kiddos, and they felt like a lot of what else was out there wasn't seeing them. And that was just, I regret that it has a very tragedy feel. It really does. And the terminology, and the slogan, they hit the mark, right? Or miss the mark. They try to hit the mark, but they miss, missing pieces and, race for the cure, all that stuff. Unfortunate. However, they do good work in the community from time to time, and they have helped me personally. I would now, of course, on my journey out, right, I would no longer associate, but my daughter Ginny, her favorite color is blue, and we will never be able to pass a house without her, "Look, it's for me," because she knows. She can't understand maybe the nuances of the terminology and the argument points back and forth, but she understands a blue light, and she understands a blue puzzle piece. And as much as that pains me, I can't take that from her. And so I do have mixed feelings. And so
What an awesome accomplishment, though, that I love that. Like, these parents are relentless.
That
Don't
was great.
underestimate what we will do for our children, right?
We sure
A parent and a child with any sort of anything, right? Anything where you need that level of like, listen to me, my kid needs this. Do not underestimate what a mother will do for her child, what a parent will do for their child. Yeah, we don't mess around. I love that.
out. And I just thought it was so interesting, though, that when I was talking to all of these other parents in this room, and we're all kind of like, yeah, we don't really like this, right? It kind of feels icky, but we were all there because that's where the movement was. And we were trying to affect as much change as possible. So I think it's interesting that even, people who work with that agency are often like, "Ooh, so I know, but," and so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So you mentioned the missing piece and the race for the cure and all that. Like, would you, for anybody who's coming to this conversation not knowing, because there are tons of people that are still slapping puzzle pieces on things, what is it about those things that is offensive or is out of sync with the movement now, or however you'd like to describe it?
I don't think anyone has a missing piece. I think everyone is exactly as they are supposed to be. And, one thing that I will share is that my daughter herself has told me that she wishes that she could go to the doctor to remove her autism. And that is something that she has said to me on more than one occasion. And that is heartbreaking. But that is also her own valid feelings, because no matter how we frame it, and no matter how celebratory we are about her differences and about how wonderful she is, she feels the difference. She feels those deficits. And it is something that she has her own feelings about, separate from us. And so, yes, and so I just would like to mention that it may seem for the rest of the community that, maybe she shouldn't be idolizing, this puzzle piece or idolizing this or whatever. But how are you going to tell her that? How am I going to tell her that? Do we just say, oh, well, because they don't really get it, we just have to make this decision for them so that we can protect them from this rhetoric, and I just don't feel that way. I feel that everyone loves, and I don't believe anyone really puts a blue light on their house to harm anyone. I don't believe anyone's intent is to harm. There is harm, right, in that message, but I don't think anyone does it intentionally to harm anyone. I don't think anyone gets a puzzle piece tattoo on their body to hurt somebody. I feel like those houses that are lit up blue and those blue puzzle pieces and all those things, those people are probably on a journey too, and they deserve to be able to come through that journey with grace and not feel shamed and not feel guilty, because it is a journey that a lot of us are on.
Well, we've talked about that with the term Asperger's too, right? That there are people that was their diagnosis and their identity for so long that now it's no one's place to go to those people and say, you can no longer identify as an Aspie or and use that term. Like, if it's their identity, it's not our place we don't use it going forward for newer diagnoses and things like that. But yeah, it's the same with Ginny and her puzzle piece and her blue light. It's like
Right.
that was that early identity. And so after the fact, it's like saying to an Aspie now, like, he was a Nazi, right? Like, yeah, we all know he was a Nazi, right?
Right. Right. Right.
But that's still
Right.
the identity, because that's how I was referred to or classified for a decade, 2 decades, my entire childhood, whatever it might be.
Right.
In that, for sure. Okay, so specifically, kind of going back to the puzzle piece symbol, it has been widely criticized by autistic advocates, and we kind of touched on the reasons for that, right? And the fact that it's not about missing a part of someone or trying to find the missing piece or any of those sorts of
Right.
things. The infinity symbol has become the preferred image. Is that correct?
That's what I see a lot now. Yes, ma'am. I think that has become the preferred image. Yes.
Okay.
And I love that. I think that's lovely.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love to hear more about that. Like, do you see a shift happening in mainstream awareness, and like, what is the meaning behind that? Right. Like, just help us understand that a little. Cause I'll admit we have it on one of our logo things. And I was totally like, I don't know, that's a Meagan thing, but that's fine. I'm sure she wouldn't put something on there that's like really offensive.
Right. Right. So this infinity symbol, right, that encompasses this entire umbrella. And I think that during this time, there is a lot of competing imagery, outdated imagery, new imagery. We want as much visibility as possible. We want the conversation to continue. And I know that is a widely accepted symbol. And I do love that very much. But I think that it's our way ahead of public perception at this time. And I think that with what's happening now, it feels to me that no one's really getting it. We're watching these DEI initiatives just completely disappear. We're watching IEPs, and it's very sad. It's very stressful, because it's just like we're making so much progress in one area, and we are robbing from this area, or this area is just being lit on fire. And it's like, how can we have this and we want to believe that this increase in understanding is happening and that this is where we are. And then what we see on the other side is disheartening.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I feel you on that. It does feel like the infinity symbol and this increased awareness and more understanding is like we're planting a sapling here, while behind us they've just raised an entire rainforest for something, and you're like, what these?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Who would have thought that we'd be, I don't know. We knew that this was going to be bad, but it's worse than, Amanda and I keep saying it. We're like, it's worse than we even, I think,
It's so
perceived
much
it.
worse.
That's it. I mean, we all know it's going to be awful. But I know even the people who were like, it's going to be awful. Have you read Project 2025? Are like, oh my God, Lord, dude, that's like, what?
Yeah.
Right?
Happening?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why we're hiding. That's why we're hiding. That's why that's why this conversation is so tough. It's because I almost feel like we're talking about things people don't want to hear about. And that frustrates me a lot, because this community is huge and getting larger. And I just feel like what we have to say is valid, but I wish it was valid in all arenas. I wish that people understood what we needed and that we're trying to get there. So it stinks.
Oh, yeah. All right. So we shall continue with that fight on another topic. So parenting an autistic child or an autistic child transitioning into an adulthood who will need continued care into adulthood comes with a unique set of challenges. And I would also assume joys. What are some of the things that you wish more people understood about your day-to-day life?
Well, aside from that, it really is day by day and it is a group effort to get us through each day, that there are a lot of joys. There are a lot of beautiful things in my life. And my all of my children, my other two children especially are heroes. They are the most wonderful, loving children on earth and non-resentful. And I say non-resentful because resentment is a theme sometimes in households like ours, where your children know that they will be tasked with caring for a sibling when we're gone. And so for us, the joy is knowing that my daughter will be with family forever, family who loved her, who will have her best interests at heart, and who are already helping to control her affairs. So there's joy there. Also, my daughter, the love and the trust that we have, I can tell what she's thinking by the look on her face. I have not a sixth, but like a seventh sense almost of what she needs, where she's at, how she's feeling, if she's hot, if she's cold, if she needs me to, let's go outside, let's take a walk, things. That nonverbal communication, that non-speaking communication that is there, that exists between mother and child anyway, for us is a little different, being completely dependent, obviously on her caregivers. And so that's pretty lovely for us. And we're able to find joy in very simple things. Every milestone is a huge deal, like a huge, huge deal. We get to celebrate everything all the time. And we have a blast in our household. And, just on the other side, just a little bit of self-acceptance that I have gained because, until I was raising children on the spectrum, I didn't realize where I lay on that spectrum. And so the things that I used to dislike about my own personality, my own ADHD traits that, I just felt like, I couldn't turn off, ended up being the exact toolkit that I needed to keep my kids safe and happy. And it's just amazing how that all works out.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so kind of sticking with that same theme for this question, what has been the most unexpected or beautiful or both part of your journey with your daughter?
The people that we've met. Our life can be very isolating. It's, again, that day by day, really is day by day. And so we've met a lot of people just out in public, walking around, people who come up to us and just to give us love for no other reason but just to hug me, just to hug her, just to tell us that they're thinking of us or that they're praying for us or that they love us and that they understand. Autism, parents attract other autism parents. And so there'll be times when I'm just walking, through the store and, we'll have a little collective and we'll all just be talking and it may only last 20 minutes, but we all needed that so much. And so you find that joy where it is. And connecting with people who are like you. It's lovely. I like it a lot.
Can I just ask a question about your day-by-day approach or
Sure.
existence, really? Because it's not an approach that you've chosen. It's just the way it is,
Absolutely.
right? Like, for anybody who's not living that existence, what changes so drastically day by day and how? So let's say, for example, tomorrow you're supposed to go to co-op or your kid has archery or whatever it is, right? What changes and how do you then have to shift gears and juggle all the things? Like, what does that actually look like for you?
That's a great question. So a lot of parents like me are in the situation where there is no staff and we have to use the hours that are provided to us or those benefits disappear. They will literally just yank your services right out from under you. Because there is a shortage, a lot of parents are doing exactly what I've done, which is they are going and getting trained professionally and then getting hired by their children's hours, like the agency that provides the hours, so that then we are working so that the hours are getting used so that the services can continue, that help yourself thing. But along those lines, every day we have a list of goals. We have, basically Ginny's visual schedule, right? So if she's not doing something that day, we will know. And it can change instantly. If she sees the number 3 or 8 unexpectedly, her OCD, she has extreme fear of certain numbers. If she sees the number 3 or 8 out in the wild and we're not expecting it, she doesn't have pen and paper to write it down. She will dig it into her leg until she can see the number physically, which is something that people just, I'm sure, sounds so strange. We are talking something just as innocuous as the number 3 that she's not expecting to see. Someone singing off key she cannot handle it. A baby crying, a dog barking. We are talking about triggers that we wouldn't understand, but that are so serious to her that it can throw off the entire day. We could have a 2-hour meltdown. We could need to call the psychiatrist. We may need intervention. And so it is truly a day by day situation, and day and night, because, she's still autistic when she's sleeping, right? And so if she wakes up in the middle of the night and everyone is asleep, we could have a situation in the middle of the night that we all are still recovering from the next day, which means that the next day is a wash for us a lot of times, so that we are not overwhelming ourselves, we're not overwhelming her, and so that we can keep everybody safe. And so it really is day by day.
Yeah, thank you for coloring that in a little bit to better understand. Well, we're beyond thankful for you joining us today. I think as our last question to leave our listeners with, if there's one takeaway, one thing about autism acceptance that you would love for people to walk away from this episode, maybe it's actionable, maybe it's just informational. What do you think that might be? I won't limit you to one thing. I told you could soapbox earlier. So
Yeah.
1, 5, 7, whatever, go for it.
Okay. All right. So love is the most important thing for me. And so I know a lot of people do focus on terminology and what's right and wrong and what's offensive, what's not offensive. And for me, there's not a whole lot that's terribly offensive. If you are loving me and you are loving my child and you are there for us and you're supporting us and you are giving your money to companies who support and, charities that are doing good work, I try not to get wrapped up, and I would encourage anyone to look at autism acceptance and awareness through that lens, because I have met some of the most wonderful people who are tattooed up with puzzle pieces. Literally, I've met such wonderful people, and just try not to judge, because, that love is there, and it may not be the most perfect love, but it is no less important. And I just really think that's super important, because we don't want to vilify anybody. We are all in it together. And so all awareness is awareness. So that's how I feel. That's the only soapbox I have.
I love it.
Thank you.
Although I'm sure we could find another soapbox or two for you.
Probably. I'll spare you. I'll spare you that today. So
Leigha agreed to come out of her shell for Autism Acceptance Month this month. So she's coming out slowly, right? She's
slowly.
her head up her shell.
A little bit. I really appreciate you guys having me.
We really appreciate you coming. I think, sometimes we talk a lot about our own personal experiences and the way that things affect us and impact us. But sometimes there's great value, right, in expanding the discussion and bringing other people in. We had a book club episode here just recently that talked about that, that isolation isn't good for any parent. And if you're raising a differently wired kiddo, how do you reach out, and how do you create these communities and allyship and just your people? And so we really appreciate you coming on here and giving us insight into your world. And, really, we joke about you sticking your head out a little for this month, but, it's no small thing, right? Like we all have ego, and we have concerns, and we have all of those things, and not in a bad way, but it's hard to put yourself out there and say, I'm going to talk about this thing and my world. And we really appreciate you coming and sharing that with us and all of our listeners.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's a private thing for me. I don't talk too much about it. And so I appreciate, you being curious and wanting to know. I hope that I could bring something to the conversation. So, thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, for sure. All right. Well, we wrap up each episode with a mantra. So we have a mantra for today. Acceptance means meeting people where they are, not where the world expects them to be. Let's keep listening, learning, and loving loudly and without conditions.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for joining us, Leigha. And if you have any questions or comments, anything, as always, feel free. We are a kindness community, as we harp on all the time. So
Right.
Unkindness doesn't fly here, but I welcome all questions and curiosity that come with kindness and a kind heart. So Feel free to drop anything in the comments. Come join our Facebook group, like Amanda said, and let's all continue to learn and grow together. But in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.
Thanks.
Thank you, Leigha.
Thank you.